Found Objects by Thomas Daniell in Impasse de Lilas, an initiative by rêve, MBL Architects and Accattone. Founding beauty in the mundane, or finding the mundane to be beautiful, is a perennial theme in the history of Japanese aesthetics that can be traced back at least as far as 16th century tea master Sen no Rikyu, 1522-1591, the key figure in codifying the tea ceremony as it is known today. Prior to Rikyu, the tea ceremony tended to be a raucous, hedonistic event combined with plenty of food, alcohol, gambling, and hot spring bathing. Though the ritualized drinking of tea had first emerged in the Zen temples of Kyoto, it was adopted by the samurai warrior class as a way of showing culture and wealth, or at least conspicuous consumption, ostentatiously proving that one had time and money to spare, much like playing golf in Japan today. Servants prepared tea in ornate porcelain cups and other utensils, spoons, whisks, and so on, usually imported from China, and served it to guests in large, opulent, decorated rooms. Though these undoubtedly represented a descent from the sacred to the profane, the samurai were genuine aesthetes, and their participation in the world of tea did foster an increasingly sophisticated appreciation for the arts, and indeed a nascent art market, as competition for the most beautiful tea bowls radically increased their prices. Rikyu was tea advisor to Hideyoshi Toyotomi, the warlord who rose from peasant origins to become the unifier and de facto ruler of Japan after centuries of civil war. Hoping to also assure his supremacy in the cultural sphere, Hideyoshi commissioned a portable tea room clad in gold leaf, with red silk in the sliding shoji screens, red fabric covering the tatami mat floor, and a set of tea utensils made from pure gold. First installed at the Imperial Palace in Kyoto in 1586 in order to hold a tea ceremony for the emperor, Hideyoshi used the golden tea room to entertain and intimidate his many guests. Though Rikyu was probably involved in its design and certainly participated in events there, in pointed contrast to Hideyoshi's nouveau riche vulgarity, he advocated what is known as the Wabicha tea ceremony, to be held in a small humble room that resembled an impoverished hermit's hut. The host would serve the tea unassisted in simple, unglazed ceramic cups, imperfect, everyday objects, albeit chosen with exquisite care and taste. In rejecting the luxurious interiors and expensive utensils preferred by the wealthy, Rikyu fostered a sensitivity to the poetics of the prosaic that is central to Japanese culture even now. Illustrated surveys of ordinary lifestyles have a long history in Japan, but in the modern architectural world, the appreciation for mundane buildings and objects began with the work of Wajiro Kon, 1888-1973, an architecture professor at Waseda University who spent much of his career documenting the environments, artifacts, and behaviors of a radically modernizing and westernizing Japanese society. Kon's early fieldwork was on vernacular dwelling in rural Japan, working together with ethnologist Kunio Yanagita, 1875-1962. A former bureaucrat disillusioned by what he saw as the poor treatment of rural communities by the national government, Yanagita traveled throughout the provinces recording local costumes and folklore, bringing the lives of commoners into a historical discourse dominated by the deeds of aristocrats. From 1917 onward, Kon accompanied Yanagita on surveys of rural villages. As well as making precise drawings of farmhouses and their floor plans, Kon depicted the inhabitants' possessions and the ways they were stored and used, thereby indirectly recording the typical patterns of everyday life. The drawings were collected and published in 1922, but the following year, Tokyo was devastated by a major earthquake, and Kon shifted his attention to the pathetic shelters being built by homeless survivors. These were demonstrations of true minimalism, the kind of dwelling and possessions and behaviors that arise from having effectively no resources. So, as well as documenting them with sketches and photographs, Kon and a few artist friends formed a group that used paint and ornamentation to give them a more cheerful appearance. Kon's next phase of work was the invention of a new discipline he called modernology, that, in his words, exists in temporal opposition to archaeology and spatial opposition to ethnology. In simple terms, its aim is research that takes as its object of study the everyday life of today's cultured people. Together with students and colleagues, Kon made precisely detailed drawings of various unusual or, more to the point, usual subjects. For their first survey, conducted in May 1925, they stood on a street corner in the Ginza shopping district for several days, observing pedestrians in order to determine the percentage of Japanese versus Western clothing and hairstyles. They later mapped the distribution of shops in Ginza and drew streetscapes showing the rows of adjacent facades. But their choice of subjects quickly became broad and promiscuous. They listed all the products for sale in a downtown market, documented space layouts and possessions in the homes of newlyweds, observed the ways laborers slept on their lunch breaks, and stalked young women through the city in order to track their buying habits, as well as their shortening skirts. Indeed, this may have been pioneering and informative fieldwork, but it was not without a sense of humor.